Thanks for the opportunity. The part she cut out is basically my job is to explain everything you need to know about public input in terms of pizza and beer. So that's why you go to school for all those years and don't earn money instead. Great to be here. Delightful to have this turnout. Hopefully it's been a great conference for you so far, right? Awesome. Great speakers. So that ends now. As Lila was kind enough to say, I can count on you to keep me awake. So that's what I'm going to do. That's where the bar is. I'm going to move fast. But yeah, I'm Kevin Lyons. I'm co-founder of FlashVote. Teach engagement, input stuff around the country. 3CMA is a great organization. There's a couple other things you might want to know about. The Certified Public Communicator Program at TCU. Anyone heard that one? Okay, really good. Good for the career professionals for local government communications. Another one that's interesting is the Davenport Institute for Public Engagement in Malibu at Pepperdine University. So that's another program, certificate program you could potentially do. And both of the staff there, both the professors there have been really helpful as we've worked through some of these issues to come up with a really simple way at the end, your final takeaway of what to do when someone needs something from you. Instead of, hey, put this crappy survey out on Facebook, how about what are we trying to do? What do we want to know from who for what, essentially, right? And so we're going to walk you through that, give you a bunch of frameworks that are helpful. I'll put some asterisks up on the ones that are probably worth taking a picture of if you want to take it home. You can also email me and we can send you more information of the broader guide. Okay? Are we ready to go?
Yes.
Let's do it. Okay, so anyone just want to throw out something they're hoping to learn in the next 45 plus minutes? How to convince people internally not to send crappy surveys. Perfect. I've got a bonus card trick at the end that might be the best thing for that. Yes?
How to get statistically significant numbers of results so that it's worthwhile to do.
Okay, how to get statistically significant numbers. We'll get into some of the aspects of that. Perfect. Good. Yes?
What are your favorite KPIs for measuring effectiveness?
Favorite KPIs for measuring effectiveness overall. Absolutely, yes.
How do we know what people are actually thinking?
How do we know what people are actually thinking? Well, you can ask a person what they're actually thinking. How do you know what your community's actually thinking? A lot harder. Okay, and we'll get into that. Terrific. And what do you do right now that feels like it might be a waste of time when it comes to input and engagement? Yes?
Explaining things over and over again.
Explaining things over and over again. That's super fun, right? Yeah, what else? Anyone else got something where you're kind of like, I'm not sure this juice is worth the squeeze? Yes?
Some meta ads.
Meta ads. Yeah.
Depends on which one.
Okay. And what about when it comes to things you might do to solicit input? Beyond the meta ads, which is a great example. Anything else? Yes.
How do I reach everyone equitably?
Equitably. How do you reach everyone equitably? More equitably than you're doing now. So meetings aren't doing it for you? Okay. Yeah, meetings may not be the best way to do that. We'll get into that. Okay, so here's where we're going. 4 parts. We're going to start with what is engagement actually and why do it? And then get into how to identify that unrepresentative input from an inequitable assortment of folks. And then how to get more valuable input with less effort, some do's and don'ts. Finally, we'll wrap up with some engagement guides that I've kind of hinted at already and some other tips and tricks. And then I'll take your questions and show you a card trick video, which you can use. I'm going to build it up because it's not that good. No, it's something you can share with your colleagues to help them understand these challenges. Okay, so what is engagement and why do it? Kind of a suitcase word, right? Like people say, we need to do engagement. Like, what do you mean? What do you guys think? Well, is it outbound communications? No, that's different. That's classic PIO, right? Just push information out. By the way, that's what PIO should stand for. Push information out. It's different from engagement. Okay, is it transactions? Paying a bill, signing up for a class? No, that's customer service, really. They want to do something and you're making it easy for them. Think of it as input, as listening to your community in different ways that you can. And when you think about what's the point of it, well, what is the point of that? Right? What is the point of some of these things you wanted to learn about? Throw out some ideas. What do you got? Why do we do engagement? What do we want to accomplish with engagement? Yes?
Better decision making.
Better decision making. Okay, who's got another one?
Impact that people can feel.
Impact that they can feel, right? Kind of like some trust building, basically. Perfect. Who's got another one?
Make sure projects align with community needs and expectations.
Okay, yeah. Make sure the projects get some data that shows you that you're doing what the community actually wants you to do, what they need, want, prioritize, right? Okay, great. Anyone else?
Sense of belonging.
Sense of belonging. Yeah, so make them feel part of the decision. Again, part of that trust building. All right, you guys nailed it. So basically, when you think about the community input, what you can actually get in, ideally, even from public comments at a meeting, you might learn some facts you didn't know, right? It could happen. It's not going to be a high hit rate. You might get some ideas you didn't even have. That's what a good ideation session will give you. Again, maybe, maybe not. You might hear some questions you hadn't asked. So those are all useful things, right? You can see how that would be helpful. Okay, and you can learn what the community wants, needs, prefers. And you can also build credibility, right? Belonging, trust by sincere listening. And honestly, you can actually look like you care sometimes. Take that how you will. Okay, so if you want to group these things, that first group is really these new facts and ideas possibility, which can steer a decision in a better direction. That's data for decisions. It's one of those big categories that we heard. Similarly, learning what the community wants. That's also data for decisions, a public preference, public percentages, essentially, right? And then the last category, this is more interaction. So this is the trust building. The interaction that is going to, oh, they're listening to me. Or even just like seeing these people, who they are, as we saw in the previous presentation. Okay, so if you think about these three useful types of input, when you really want to use the word engagement correctly, think of it as like collecting these new facts and ideas for decision, because they could come from any one person at any time, any way, essentially, right? You just have to get lucky. You have to find that nugget of gold. And then scientific surveys, well, that's how you would actually estimate a statistically valid, not self-selected, not a lot of things, number of people that's going to allow you to tell what a larger group thinks. That's the preferences for decisions. And the last one is that interaction to build trust. So the first one, they're coming to you. That's the classic engagement thing. You get it whether you ask for it or not, right? Scientific surveys has to be done in a structured way where you go to them in a certain way and then you get the data back in a certain way. Also, both of those are structured compared to the engagement. And then the interaction, well, that's that two-way human building trust. The first part is the data for decisions. That's what we're mostly going to focus on today. But I want to give you one framework we actually developed recently with the folks at CPC. And they do a lot of research on listening, especially in difficult situations. The idea is, are we going to listen to, which is trust? I'm going to pay attention, look in the eyes. I'm just going to sit there, actually, maybe just let you vent, like I should do more with my wife. But I fall into, I'm listening for something, right? I want to hear the problem so I can solve it or whatever, right? Listening for is different. That's where we're listening for the new ideas, the facts, the something interesting that's going to go into the decision, or for what the community actually wants. So if you think of the listen to for building trust, and the listen for stuff that you can use for making better decisions. Question one is like, hey, what do you want to do? Do we want to interact and answer questions? Or do we want to collect new facts and ideas and feedback? Or do we want to understand community preferences? Each one of those is a very different thing with a very different strategy and tool. Question two then is, how do you actually collect your input? Well, any interactive forum will work. Live in person, online, probably not social media, unfortunately, but maybe your own engagement forum. And then the last one is to understand the community preferences. You can see you're in scientific survey land. And there's some overlap on some of these. At some point, you can ask open-ended questions in a scientific survey. You can just collect input in a live forum, right? But at the end of the day, each one of these fits what you're trying to do. And when you really want to get into the more specifics of what tools should you use, there's just a spectrum at the bottom. So what you want to make sure, this is one you can shoot at if you want. I can also send these to you later. But this is a way, kind of a first pass at thinking about what tool are we going to use for what purpose. Okay, make sense? With me so far? Awesome. That's it. You can zone out the rest of the way. No, there's a couple other frameworks that hopefully you find useful. So another thing, for those of you who have any data background, you may have heard like qualitative research or quantitative research. Use those words when you want to sound fancy. when you want to make someone maybe not ask a lot of questions. The qualitative is just the open-ended stuff you're going to get that's useful. The quantitative is the numbers. It's those percentages that you're going to be able to rely on and defend in decision making. Okay, perfect. So for anyone who's not clear about the value of input as data for decisions, you've probably all heard of working smarter, right? It's kind of like working on your job, not in it. And when you figure out how to do something, you might get a great tip from somewhere. Turns out it's really a lot easier to rent a backhoe than move rocks by hand. Personal experience. For like $200, they'll rent a backhoe to any idiot, and I proved it. So probably haven't heard of working wiser. Now think about that as like, what are we going to do? So you could be a city in Texas who's got the most efficient contractor in the world and the best price and the best materials to build a ice hockey rink that no one uses for $12 million. Is that a good use of those funds? You did the how-to perfectly, but the what-to was missing. That's a real example. It's a big problem. So it turns out, with that kind of big picture, the what to do, the returns on investing in that are 100x to 1,000x. Like you would have had $12 million to spend on so many other things that people would have loved and would have used instead of the loud, noisy people who kept bothering you. Same with smarter though. Ideas can be really helpful. We were at a public meeting in my town, and we're talking about renting out a parking lot to a sideshow. If you know, that's where the cars spin around and tear it up, because we were going to repave it. We said, we'll do a sideshow, it'll pay for itself. Completely randomly, someone shows up at the podium for public comment, and they say, hey, so my name's Bob. I happen to have worked in NASCAR for 30 years doing insurance. And he told us it was probably a bad idea. The actual cost of a properly insured event was going to dwarf what we hoped to rent the parking lot for. Incredible, didn't do it. So grateful for that one tiny bit of information. Okay? It can happen. You just have to sift through a lot of crap, usually. Okay, and there's another way to think about the problem of decisions without user input. Kind of a classic concept where you have a great design. You built the whole thing. It's going to be perfect on paper, and then you find out it's not really how the things should be used. Okay? Anyone feel this? Ever happened in their community? Yeah, we're all guilty. Okay, so that's the value part. Real quick, so before we get into some of the more technical stuff, which best describes how you feel about online polls and surveys? Okay, probably all done one or at least taken one. Let's see, quick show of hands, good data, glad we can get it. Okay? Okay, online polls, we're getting some hands, about 4 or 5, yeah. Probably not great, but better than nothing. Okay, vast majority, yeah, a lot of hands, so that's the one. Bad data, would never use it. Okay, so probably not great, but better than nothing is the winner there. We're going to come back to this question after this section. Okay, you ready? How to identify unrepresentative input. I'll give you some thought experiments you can run, but give you some data first. So here's a simple role play you can share, and you can use this to explain or motivate, hopefully, colleagues. I want you to imagine 10,000 people chipping in $5 each for pizza. See, I promised you pizza. There's no beer in this one, unless your special request. Your job is to figure out what toppings to order for everybody, okay? So, that's all you got. Hey, here's a pile of $50,000. Get pizza for everybody. How are you going to figure out what toppings to get? Here's your org chart, by the way. Maybe familiar to you in a government context. Okay, you thinking about it? What's the first thing you're going to do? Which of these work? Order what you want? I mean, it's good for one person, right? We're on our way. Of course not. Yeah, you're not terrible people. Ask your friends. Yeah? By the way, do elected officials do both of these things? Yeah, right? Is that their job? No. Exactly. How about we call a meeting? Well, you laughed. You laughed and shook your head. That's not a great idea? Come on. You want to find out what the anchovy people think? When they all get on the same bus and email each other? Yeah. You can see a problem in that. How about we read social media posts? That's how we're going to figure it. Boo. You're going to find out what toppings people hate. Oh, you like pepperoni? Nobody likes pepperoni, you know. Okay, that's not good. No, not working for you? Huh. Start an online engagement forum. There we go. Now all the pineapple people can take it over and crowd out all the other people. Yeah, or do an online survey. There we go, right? So we put a questionnaire out there, send it out in the wild. The friends of anchovy and pineapple pizza find it. 90% of them want anchovy pizza with pineapple. And you're ordering that for your community. Win? What could go wrong? No. Seems terrible, right? Which of those, by the way, do we do with government? All of them. The E, I believe, was the answer. All of the above? Yeah. So, no, they're all obviously unrepresentative when you put them in such a simple context that we're all familiar with doing, right? You'd be kind of like, what are you doing? And it would end badly, of course, if you based your order on what you heard from these channels. So what is the right answer, actually? Wave a magic wand. What's the right answer? Anyone want to take a guess? Get a representative sample. That would be good. There's actually one choice that's even better. Take everyone's order. Wouldn't that be cool, right? So if you could take everyone's order, that'd be great, except that probably costs $10 a person. Now you got no money left for pizza, and you owe. So, yeah, so the next best is if you could get a scientific survey of regular people, then you could find out what toppings they like, estimate some percentages of the anchovy, which is not zero. Anyone else like anchovy? Can I get a yes? My new best friend. And, pepperoni is going to be pretty high. We know this because people have actually done scientific surveys on America's least favorite pizza topping, which is anchovies, and most favorite, which is pepperoni. So, yeah, that's your trade-off. Now, just to test and see if you retained something I mentioned earlier, how might some of these other things be useful besides the order what you want? Because that's just being a jerk. What kind of data might you get from some of these other things? Quality, like some feedback from the pizza I heard? Yeah? And what about before the decision? It's a little hard to think of with pizza, but could you get a new idea, maybe? A new fact, a new something? Like, hey, here's a pizza place that does something really well, or here's some new topping ideas you probably haven't heard of. Maybe. Can you visualize it? Right? Yeah. So that would be useful, actually. And so if you are mapping, if you're basically saying, hey, we're going to do this kind of input because this is the kind of comments we're looking for, that's great. So in a nutshell, what is a scientific survey? It sounds fancy and it's a nerd word, right? Okay. Do the people in my sample, the people I'm hearing from, you can ask yourself this one question. This is statistics in a nutshell. Do they look just like the people not in my sample? Do they look like the people I'm not hearing from? Okay? And if you can think of how the people that you're hearing from might be different from the people you're not hearing from, you're getting an unrepresentative sample. Sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes it's not as easy. When it's your frequent flyers, your STP, your hateful eights, your gotcha gang, thank you for that one. You can visualize that, thank God, these people are not like the rest of the people in my community. There, I said it out loud. But, the how might they be different is the key to thinking about the usefulness of the input you're getting when you're trying to measure community preferences, right? Estimate community percentages. See how that works? Okay. Because if you have a misleading, unrepresentative group and you say, well, I guess 90% of people do want anchovy pizza. That's what the data says. No, wait, there's a decimal point. It's 90.2. That's good data. Of course it isn't. Your sample was all the anchovy people who rallied their friends to come to your meeting or your online forum. Okay. So if we think about how it might be different, here's a detailed case study from a university down the road that has been around for about 400 years. And bless these names up here, the grad students and the professor. They all went to public meetings and they wrote down what everyone said and their demographics. And then they did the same for an online survey, and then we did a scientific survey coming in. So the meeting input for this new community center project in the town of Billerica was, hey, what do we need? What do we need? We're going to redo our community center. These are big dollar projects, right? Tens of millions of dollars. And what happened was, in the meeting, the in-person meeting, health and social services and study meeting and event space were the top two. Well above the 50% line, right? Okay, cool. So who do you think went to that meeting? Old people or young people? Older people, yeah. 81% of them were over 60. So with your eyes, what are you thinking? Representative or not representative? No, because you know there's people under 60 in your town, right? So that's a giveaway. That's easy. So what do they do next? Well, you go, let's do an online survey. Let's push it out with social media, do the usual thing. And lo and behold, are those results basically the same? Like you're going, okay, cool. And the demographics, older or younger than the meeting, do you think? With the online? Younger, yeah, absolutely. And you nailed it. You guys are all professional communicators. You got that stuff down. Can identify old people, and you know who's more likely to use different social media, even though they call it Mom Book now. So about 31% of people were over 60. So now we're really looking like the community a lot more. Same results, different demographics. Honestly, if you had these results, you'd be thinking, okay, cool, now we know what to do in the community center. The last step was doing a scientific survey. And so we actually built a panel of regular people first in Billerica. Just said, hey, you got a minute to help make Billerica better? No topic. They had no idea what survey was coming. So the best possible way to minimize and eliminate self-selection. And here's what we got. 3 out of the 5 were flipped. Right? And in Sudbury, for example, our very first survey with them years ago, you may remember this one, 85% of people said they'd pay $100 for a community center. We tested it, it was 33%. It was already on the town warrant. Who knows what a town warrant is? It got shot down at that meeting also, kind of validating our data at least. That's the risk you run up against. What about our demographics though? Anyone got any thoughts on maybe ours are just different in some obvious way? No, it's weird, right? Like what are they going to be different? Ours look like the community too. So the only difference is what's in people's heads, which you can't see. And in this case, all those other people, they knew what the topic was. They had some axe to grind. They shared it with their friends, right? And that's what changes the sample you're going to get. Can you visualize that a little bit now, right? You're putting bait out there, basically, when you have a meeting with a topic or you have a survey with a topic. And that bait's going to get passed around. Word's going to spread. Okay, so conclusion, obviously traditional methods of community input are biased. There's a bigger question though, like how often does this happen? And so something we did, we were asked, I was teaching something like this 4 years ago and someone said, hey, how often is the input a bad representation of the community? And so we looked at our first 300 surveys and we went through and we matched them to data people had from what they were hearing, thinking, online surveys they'd done, what people believed the community said. So how often do you think in your community, if you had to guess, how often do you think the public input sentiment that you get from the people you hear from through all these channels that we talked about is a good match for what the whole community thinks? 0. Okay. Who's got under 0? Okay, that was good. That's good. Communication's correct. Yeah, so super low, right? Because you're professional local government communicators. Yeah, you're basically correct. Statistically indistinguishable from 5%, which is what we found, which is like a local, it's like a clock being right, broken clock being right twice a day. So that meant that was the same amount and the same side as the actual community sentiment. What's interesting then is about 25% of the time you had a really small group that felt a lot bigger, but not big enough to be a majority, right? But just enough to be loud and make you think they were a lot bigger than they actually were. But what does that leave? This is the cool part, or disturbing part. 70% of the time, the input that they heard was the opposite of what the community wanted. So just picture this. If they just said, hey, thank you all for coming tonight. We've heard loud and clear that you're against the recycling change. So we'll be moving full speed ahead with the recycling change. They would be twice as good at decision making compared to if they listened to the input. Think about that. Are your elected officials wired that way? No. And if we think about the work that we do as communicators, I'm like a part-time, 1 day a month communicator for my community. I feel your pain. That's all I'm going to say about that. 70% of the time, if you're trying to get preferences from doing engagement, you're not going to get it. It's going to be a waste of your time. So think about ways you can cut back on that now. Okay, that's the promise. And yeah, by the way, back to those elected officials, how often do you think they think what they hear is a good match. Higher or lower than 0%? Yeah. Some of them are really good, by the way. The 2 10-term mayors, I bet, were like, ignore the noise. Coincidence. Not coincidence. Of course, that's why they became 10-term mayors. But most of them start at about 50% and go up. They think, better than nothing. Glad to have it, right? Oh, so glad 3 people came to the meeting tonight. Now we know what the community thinks. Exactly. Yeah, but they're human, and it's great that you want to respond to the people in front of you. You care about them. Your instincts, your motivations are all good. Problem is your slice of the universe that we evolved, living in like desperate tribes of a few hundred people doesn't work in a community of 10,000, 100,000, and so on. So being responsive to that or not responsive doesn't mean you're going to get kicked out and die. Interesting. Like our brains are really wired to be receptive, and that's great. Just got to channel it. Okay, so 2 more quick exercises on visualizing that self-selection. So imagine there was a survey that went out about a new park, and we said, hey, if there was a new park here, would you be likely to use it? This is a SurveyMonkey version. Coming up next. The scientific sample says 28% of people will use it. What do you think the open sample, the engagement sample, is going to say compared to the scientific sample? Higher or lower? Likely to use the park? Higher. Everyone's saying higher. You are correct. Yeah, twice as likely. Twice as likely. This you could visualize. You could visualize who's going to be following the issue, who's going to find out about it, who's going to participate at higher rates, who's going to pass it to their friends, right? Who's going to be most interested, just different from the regular community, people who are more likely to use the park. Over and over again, just think about that. Who's going to be interested? That's who I'm going to hear from. That's what the really self-selection is. Here's another one kind of after this bad news. I want to give you something uplifting. So imagine you ask residents, do they care about specific politicians or about good performance? So here's the question. Which is more important to you, picture your residents, about city commissioner elections? That the person or people I vote for win, or that whoever wins does a good job? Which one do you think is more popular with residents? Second one does a good job. Anyone for the first one? Okay, we got some people. Yep, about a third. And the second one? Okay, similar. Okay, maybe a little more. All right, you ready? We've done this in multiple communities. Not sure is a great answer, by the way. Always. Yes. And we always include it in every choice because, hey, 95% of people, whoever wins does a good job. But in our world, who do we see milling around, right? The people trying to, what's the right word? Brown nose, I guess? Elected officials, it's one of the words. Hang around, kiss up, right? Politics is super important to them, super engaged. That is not your community. That's 3% of this community, 4% of another one where we did it. So these are regular people. They just want you to do a good job, and they love when you do it. Isn't that nice? Great. Just stay off of Facebook for a while you're enjoying that faith in humanity that you just felt restored. Okay. So if you want to visualize your whole community, this is the first nerdy graph. A bell curve, okay? If you picture your community as having these edges in a middle, and if you like the word whacktivist, feel free to use it. Like figure them wacky activists out there on the edges. Who you're going to hear from? Most of those guys. This is who you usually hear from. In fact, usually the haters a little bit more. They're a little more motivated for various reasons. And when that happens, picture that elected official. You just got yelled at by 5 people in a row. Happened to me in a meeting on cannabis that I'm a county advisory official. You get yelled at for a half hour. You start to go, what are we doing? You know? In this case, 35 minutes of getting like, this is terrible. We don't want cannabis in our town. No one wants this. We shouldn't have a retail store here. And a person stands up and they go, he was brave. He says, hey, just so you know, 72% of this precinct voted in favor of this. You just feel it, like all the air left the room. And from that moment forward, we didn't play that game anymore. It was, all right, well, where would we put it? How close to a school? When would security be there, right? So challenge here is when you hear this from the haters, sometimes, it's Yeah, PTSD for you. Probably not as well dressed. It feels like this, doesn't it? Like that's how our brains are wired, to keep us alive. But could always be this, couldn't it? Yeah, and as you saw, it usually is more like this. That's cool. But only you know that right now. As communicators, you elected officials don't, and other people have trouble too. And it's the emotional reaction that causes the follow-up reaction when they feel they got to do something about it, even if it's not going to be what the community actually wants. It's going to make more people angrier than if they just ignored them. Okay, so what's missing? The regular people spread out throughout your community, hearing from them. If you get a sample of those folks, and there's no bait, you're going to have the best possible statistical representation of your community. Make sense? You can visualize it, see all the challenges? Great. And there was talk of complaints earlier. All we hear is complaints, essentially, right? Here's an example of a town in Southern California. They had parks maintenance cut back, and they got nothing but complaints. Literally. They thought everyone hates their parks. Morale was crushed in the department. So budget down. They thought maintenance had been terrible. So we did a survey. They literally got nothing but complaints. They were hearing from 0.3% of their community. And the communicator said as soon as they saw this data, their morale bounced back instantly. They were excited to come work again. But that's all it takes. Example like that is how you get past the complaints. You're going to get the complaints, by the way. Your complaints can either be 100% of what you get, or they can be 0.3% of what you get, depending on your data and how you get it and what you're trying to do. Cool. One other example, since a bunch of you guys in New England do run your own schools. This is a classic one. First survey we ever did in schools. Sex ed curriculum, we're going to change it. Oh boy, can of worms, right? Well, this is what they perceived. And actually, this is the exact SurveyMonkey data they got. So people said, it's terrible, we strongly disagree. It's awesome, we strongly agree. That's a little creepy too. And what's missing? The normal middle people, right? You can see it. Just flip it over and you've got a bell curve. So the reality was actually about 90% support for these elements. And they were able to move ahead once they had that unself-selected data. Okay, so in a nutshell, think of engagement versus scientific surveys, statistically valid stuff. What goes wrong? I've hinted at it, but really it's the noisy are not representative of the many. That's the challenge. That's why you guessed 0% is how often they are a representation. People follow the topics they're interested in. They participate because of their interest. They can participate multiple times if motivated. We often think of that one, but the big one is they tell their like-minded friends to participate. It's a snowball sample. It's a technical term, believe it or not. Yeah, they tell, and that's what creates the mess. So in a nutshell, the difference is engagement. That's input from people especially interested in the topic. And that can be super useful. You want to know what the pickleball players think about the pickleball court design. That's great. They're the experts. That's who you want to hear from. You want to know if you should convert all your tennis courts to pickleball courts. Do not solicit the pickleball people. Just in general, don't solicit the pickleball people. That's too close to home too. Okay, so the difference, scientific surveys, is getting input from people not especially interested in a topic. And that makes it a lot harder. And that's why traditionally, they're super expensive, they take a long time, because it's a lot of work. It's a different process. But that's what gives you the data if you want to know percentages. So one case, they come to you again. The other one is that structured process. Okay, and when you think about which one is each for, well, engagement is how you're going to get those open-ended questions answered. You can do it any way you want. Facts, ideas, feedback you didn't have that's useful. Scientific surveys, if you think multiple choice, think scientific survey. What's that percentage you want to measure and from who? That's how you get those preferences and priorities. And the one big mismatch is responsible for most of that 70% of wasted effort. Can you visualize that now? Doing engagement and getting percentages. Asking multiple choice questions and putting them out in the wild. Okay. People will ask you to do that, don't they? Yeah. Okay, card trick, it's still coming. So now, what describes how you feel about online polls and surveys? See if it's changed. Who's got good data? Glad we can get it. Okay, the hands are down. Okay.
I think sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, well, about to show you when, exactly when. How about probably not great, but better than nothing? Yeah, okay. Bad data would never use it. Okay, so it turns out a good way to think about it is if you're looking to get facts or ideas, you're going to ask open-ended questions. It's a great thing to do. Throw it out there, hope someone finds it with something useful to say, like our insurance guy. Bad data, though, if you're looking for preferences for the community, especially think of it as like the hotter the topic, the worse the data. The more mundane the topic, the better, the more likely it might be okay. And I'll give you a hack on that too. Okay? Good on that? All right. So, part 3, give you a few tips and tricks on how to get a little more valuable input with less effort, specifically on these channels that we use. So, meetings, social media, online surveys, scientific surveys, just quick tips. But for the in-person meetings, I was on a podcast and someone said, hey, what is the one thing you would say to people? Never count comments. Do people count comments? Yeah. Do the elected officials sometimes say, excuse me, clerk, how many people were for this evening? And this happened at a county meeting with 400,000 people. I threw up in my head. So don't do that. We want a dog park there. We want a dog park there. We want, whatever it is. Yeah. Surveys are always going to tell you something different. This is an example from San Jose, California. Here's another one that's actually pretty helpful. This comes from federal commenting rules. If you ever heard of like NEPA, they say, it is important to understand that your comments on an agenda item are not a vote. It's that simple. Changes it, right? Oh, we're here to get your helpful comment. In fact, you can follow it up. When I was running the meetings, we did this. We encourage people. We'd say, hey, remember, your comment's not a vote. And if you tell us something we already know, we're probably going to ignore it because we already heard it in a polite way, not in a Massachusetts way. So do not waste your time, not my time. Do not waste your time by repeating anything that's already been said. We recommend that. Otherwise, it's going to tune you out. So that can be really helpful for shorter meetings, more effective input from the public. Another one is, I'm just going to say again, remember, ignore the noise. Take a picture of this in your head. Great meeting. There's a video of it in New Orleans where literally a company hired paid actors to come to the meeting. Just that's how extreme. It's really easy to visualize in that case. Okay, for social media, never pay attention to comment sentiments. The content of the comment might be useful. You might learn something from it, right? But essentially, there's a quote from a manager in Colorado. Thorn in my side is when someone says something on Nextdoor and the council thinks that's what the whole community thinks. Do you feel that one? Yeah, it's tough. Okay, so similarly, don't do social media polls. Is this app just all complainers? Yes or yes? I do a different talk on survey design. That's not a valid question. Anyone know where that's from? Best of Nextdoor? Please tell me you still visit there. Oh my God. Put aside some time. Go down that rabbit hole. It's quite terrifying and hilarious. Sometimes at the same time. Cool. And if you think of the idea, well, we're going to do a demographically representative poll on social media. Well, we've seen what that does with the Harvard case study. That doesn't tell you what's happening either because they know the topic. So, and there's other reasons like who's actually on Facebook, who's active, who's looking at ads and so on. From the poll that came out, I think even Harvard was associated with this loosely. 23% will take the vaccine is what they came up with. This is a time when anti-vax people were really strong on Facebook. The real answer? 70%. That's what we measured too, by the way, for the state of South Carolina. And this was verified with actual vaccination. So again, whoa, beware. And the other thing is, do look at the comments for new facts or ideas. It might be the first time you hear about something that just broke, a street light that's out, or an accident or something. So it's useful for that. And Nextdoor, if you can't avoid it entirely, no, it's actually useful for pushing out information, like social media in general, for outbound stuff. Some people are starting to disable comments more generally on social media, which is interesting. Now, of course, you can't individually do stuff, as you all know, because law and lawsuits and expensive lawsuits. But you have to, if you want to be intentional about what are we actually trying to do with social media, there may be cases where you're just trying to get information out. What's the point of the comments? Or you might have a separate manageable thread for comments, so it's easier to respond to. Okay, online surveys. You get the idea there. There's a video that actually is not going to play with this setup, so never mind. But just don't ask multiple choice questions. Do ask open-ended questions. That's simple. Solicit the ideas. Do ideation. But if you're going to ask a multiple choice question, you're going to end up with a percentage. Someone's going to think that might be the community if it's not. Also, if you're doing a small group of people, like pickleball players or SDR owners or some other group you can access and target directly, you can do an online survey form. They'll respond at a high rate, and so you'll get a good sample of that group, that small group. Just doesn't work at the community level because the numbers are too big you're trying to get to. So that's a useful thing to do with those. Okay, scientific surveys. This is a hack I promised. If you can actually attract people based on one topic with an online survey that goes out in the wild, you could sneak in a question that's totally different. And that one question might be useful. So you could say, hey, take the backyard chicken survey or take the community center survey, right? And then the only thing you really care about is do you recycle used oil? Or do you something else? And that question will not be self-selected. That's what's cool about that. Can you see how that would work? You can use it in a pinch. It makes you kind of look weird, but if it's, if that's all you really need to know, you'll get away with it. People won't complain. There's always some snark. Okay, but it'll work for your data needs. The other one is underrated, unbiased intercept surveys, the nerd word. But basically, you walk around and talk with people at some event that has nothing to do with the topic that you care about. And it's surprising, but if you can get 25 people, you got a plus or minus 20% estimate on what people actually think. So that means you can figure out, are we really over here or are we really over here in a pinch? Now, will that be enough to convince everyone that that's the true data? Maybe not. But at least you can have something to build off of. Maybe a reason to go to the next step. Make sense? You see yourself doing those? Not that hard. Just get a little what do you call it? A freaking easel. What do you call these things again? iPad is good too. Yes. Paper's easy. iPad, it can be super simple and cheap. If you have an iPad, that's even better. And just write down what people said. 2 questions, you can figure it out. Cool. And if you want to do scientific surveys for governments, it's my 15-second advertisement. So we created Flashvote to solve this problem, basically. So faster, easier, better, cheaper data. So that in 48 hours, you can know what your community thinks about anything throughout the year on demand. Okay. So recapping the question types, open-ended versus preferences versus percentages. You can ask the open-ended factual questions anywhere. Hey, anyone know a good pizza place? Any ideas for the vacant lot near the school we're going to develop? What would you change about trash service? Just avoid the preference questions unless you're doing it in a targeted way to the group you want to hear from. That's who makes the best pizza. Or should we build a field or playground? Or should we change recycling to every other week? Okay, cool. Questions so far? Yes? Yeah.
So what about if there's a scenario where the average community member is unlikely to have an opinion or know about, like if there's a level of expertise that you kind of need. For instance, we have a regional trail plan we're trying to put in place, and there's a nightmare survey with like 50 different trails that we're asking like which are your top 10 trails you want
Yeah.
to be fixed, and you have to know about trails, and so yeah, like how do you get that?
Yeah, now you're giving me the PTSD, so thank you. I owe it to you at this point. So we get surveys like that as a first draft sometimes from a consultant, sometimes it's from a government agency. And I'm not going into this today, but the key thing is you have to target expertise in the resident's head. You can't manufacture it. You don't want to get sentiment. You don't want to get knee-jerk something or other. So for example, a survey came in like, hey, we want to know if people think we should be a sanctuary city. Oh boy. Well, what does that mean? I can tell you what some people will knee-jerk and some people will knee-jerk for or against it, right? But doesn't end up, we broke it down to the actual policies without ever using the word sanctuary city or anything like it or remotely close to it. Hey, here are some things we're thinking about doing to address these problems. Which of these problems do you think are an issue? Or which of these problems have you experienced is even better, right? Because now we're tapping into, for example, with STRs, short-term rentals, hey, which of these nuisances have you observed in your neighborhood, if any? Now you start to build a profile of what is there even a problem out there, right? So from that, with trails, you might say, hey, which of the following, have you used any trails in the last 12 months, and then branch from there. Which of the following have you used? Then it's like, oh, I recognize it, a description that they would know, not some insider name and so on. And now you can start to get some data. Make sense? All right, cool. Yeah. So, summarizing, when do you need that community preference data? Because you don't always need it either. Well, here's an example. I'm going to do a test. Who wants something awesome?
Yeah, I know.
Right? Seriously. No, the rest of you don't want something awesome? Well, you're not going to get it then. Yeah. Of course you want something awesome. Everyone wants that. Hey, who wants to pay more taxes? No, exactly. What's missing there? Do you feel it? The trade-off. Do you want to pay for something awesome? Maybe, right? Exactly, yeah. Depends on what the thing is, depends how much it costs. And this is where you're actually getting useful data out of people's heads. You also see surveys that don't ask these questions. We got a draft, it was like a federal transportation survey. And the question was essentially, are you for or against pedestrian deaths? I'm like, well, I'm against them. I'm so brave. Yeah, no, that's the kind of thing that you're like, come on, you know the answer to that. You don't have to ask it. There's no trade-off. Right? Now, are you for or against pedestrian deaths versus car deaths? Ooh, well, that's a terrible question anyway, but at least there's a trade-off. So yeah, what is the awesome thing? How much does it cost? And if you think just in general about where you need some input, you don't have to ask them if you want to pay more and get less. The answer is no. Or if they want to get more and pay less. Well, yeah, duh. It's the pay more, get more, or pay less, get less. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just it's going to depend on your community. You can feel that, right? How that's going to work? Ask about the trade-offs. That's the key. When you're doing community preferences, you're going to be asking about the trade-offs. That's what's going to give you the key data you need to make the decision better and be able to defend it in any situation. Okay. Here's an example from recycling, by the way, just a quick one. So you could pay more to keep the service the same. This is as recycling costs went up. Pay the same or do more sorting yourself. Pay the same or cut from weekly to every 2 weeks, or give up recycling. Now, each one of those is a trade-off, and not pay anything if you give up recycling. You can imagine every community is going to be different here. Here's what this community in Oklahoma said. Pay the same but do the sorting themselves. Pay the same but cut from weekly to 2 weeks. So essentially they're saying, you know what, it's not worth more money to me, but I'm willing to put part of me into the process. I'm willing to store it longer. I'm willing to do more work. So I like the recycling. I'm not willing to give it up either. Right? So a nuanced way to get at the data, and that's what they use to make the decision. Great. All right, now when do you not need community preference data at all? Think about that pizza example again. So you go to a pizza restaurant, they say, hey, what topping do you want? Kind of like the 10,000 people you need to find out from. And why do they do that? Do they know what topping you want? Not really, right? You're the expert in that. That's in your head. So you want to pick the toppings, the crust, the flour. Only you know what you want for that. Now suppose they go, great, thank you. We're going to get you a pepperoni, gluten-free pizza. You got a recipe for that? When does it start getting weird? Where should we buy our flour? What temperature should we set the oven at? Do they have any expertise in that? No, unless they're Wolfgang Puck or something. It's like not gonna. So that's when it's even like counterproductive to ask them because they're gonna think you're an idiot, which you're not. Okay, so think about those options. There's another example. People go, hey, Henry Ford, if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Maybe he said it, maybe he didn't. They couldn't imagine a car. But look at this more carefully. Faster. They want to go faster. They probably don't need the horse poop either. Right? There's still some useful feedback even in this thing that's made to disparage it. And that's why cars were successful. They were faster, less smelly, way more convenient for carrying stuff and so on. So at the end of the day, you want to think of don't engage to enrage. And so if there's no expertise out there and you start asking for it, it could be a problem. This is an example from New Jersey. A town was like, hey, we just did all the math on these 3 fire stations that we have to close one. And there's different costs, maintenance, response times, all this stuff. And they said, yeah, it's going to be fire station number 3 we're going to close. Now we want to get some community input. What's going to happen if you do that? You going to learn anything about the fire station math that you didn't know? No. but all the people who live near fire stations are going to 3 are going to come out, raise bloody murder, and then it might derail the perfect choice you already made for the community. So that's an engage to enrage scenario. All you're going to do is get people mad and not get any useful information from them. Does that sound familiar at all? Saw some heads nodding. Don't do that. Yeah, just say no. So we learned from some of the examples today. Okay, the last thing you say is, how was your pizza? Only you know, they don't. So that's the feedback on the service itself, always useful. And one more way of thinking about, you'll say, hey, I need to get more input. It's only a few hundred people. So which sounds better, 1,098 responses or 244 responses?
I like the higher number.
The higher number. Of course you do. It's a higher number. It's more responses. Even an elected official knows that's a better thing, right? A higher number. Unless, here's a real example of this. So from the survey sample with 1,098 responses, 14% of people have not skated or played hockey on an ice rink survey. That means 86% of people did. From the 244, only 57%, it's up to 57% have not, which means only 43% have skated or played hockey. Well, one of those was a scientific sample, the 244. That's what the regular people thought. So that's the estimate of the whole population. The higher number is actually a giveaway. If you normally get a certain amount of input and then it goes way up, that's a dead giveaway. You just got self-selection. Some group got activated, some set of people shared it. In this case, the skaters shared it with their teams and leagues, and we got a picture of a Facebook post. Someone did, have your whole family take this, your kids, your grandkids, your grandparents. Are like, we got to tell them we need this hockey rink open all the time. So they used the real data. They proposed a pilot project based on the actual demand and not what people were trying to make them think they wanted. Okay? Okay, so final recap, which channels for which input? You saw this chart with the useful input methods, engagement, scientific surveys, and then the interactions. But this is the one you can, if you want it in a nutshell, this is a good one to just take a shot of, which is basically all the channels you can use to get those ideas, facts, or feedback compared to community preferences, compared to how you can do interactions. So the engagement stuff is good for everything but community preferences. The scientific communities surveys are good for everything but the interaction, obviously. Although there are ways you can send the results to people like we do, and that helps in that regard. Okay, final takeaway. Here's a guide. Again, I can send you another version of this, but ultimately you say, hey, what's our goal? We need to just push this survey out on social media. Well, what are we trying to do? You want to make a good decision, or do you want to just build some trust? Different goal, seeing how that works. Next step, depending whether you're going in one direction or another, do you want community percentages? No, you just want the facts or ideas? Or do you want a two-way dialogue? No, I just want the input. And now you're at, okay, great, we're going to ask multiple choice questions, or we're going to ask open-ended questions, or we're going to answer questions and address concerns. That's that interaction trust building. And these are the tools you need. So feel free to shoot that if this has been helpful. All right. Questions? Yes, one more question there. Ask me anything.
Sorry, I keep asking.
That's what you're for. That's why we're here.
Can you talk a little bit about how you ensure that your group, your focus group, is an accurate representation of the community, and how you ensure that it is a scientific sample?
Yeah, so how do you ensure the people that you're hearing from, however you get the data, is a scientific sample? So, of course, no sample is ever perfect. But the key thing to do first is we focus on self-selection. So we actually still do some random sample surveys where you would contact people essentially on their phone, usually by text. But then they know the topic. And so when you really want to know the data, the key is to do it in a way where no one has any idea what's coming, but they take the survey at a really high rate. So that's step one. So inviting people to create the panel that we would create for a community is no topics, no bait, nothing. You're not looking to get everybody. You're looking to get a slice of people that give a tiny bit of a crap, basically. So we'll use things like, hey, you have a minute every few months to help make your community better. Very neutral, left brain, right brain, right? The second part of that is we do track demographics. So when people sign up, we can see gender, address, age, and we can then average that into like one summary number which is what you do with a political poll, but much better is actually to give you the samples. So you can see actually men and women are different on this topic. Age groups are different. And that's how you can serve everybody equitably. Now you can see this part of town is not as happy with their parks as this part of town, or whatever the topic is. That's the best part, because now you can go, aha, let's go look into that and see what's going on. What's not the same, or at least as good. Good. Any other questions on that? Okay. You guys think you can pass this test now? All right, I'm not a magician. See if this works. Oh no! Oh, sorry. Hold on. I have it set up here. Da, da, da. If not, I'll show it
here.
Whoops.
And I saw a card trick recently, which is a pretty cool way to illustrate the problems that we have with public input. So here we go. I'll give it a shot. Not a magician, but I did see one on TV. Okay, here we go with the red cards trick. Got a deck of cards. I will put the deck. I will pull out the cards and actually pull. We'll need a few cards for this trick, and then I will keep these, put these away. Okay, so have a look at these cards. I'm going to ask you a few questions about these. Okay, got them? See them all? All clear. Okay, here we go. So, first question. How many cards were there? 5. Pretty easy, right? Did you say 5? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, 5. 5 is what we're hearing.
There were 5.
Yeah,
Look
it's
at
not
the
hard.
cards again. One more question coming up.
You guys are experts at watching and observing.
Okay. Ready? Which cards were a pair? Did you notice that?
9, got the 9s going. Okay, very good. I think. Maybe. Let's see.
Did you see the 9s? Pair of 9s. Okay. So you're doing great. Good stuff. All right. So last question. So I now actually have a blue card that I'm going to throw in the deck. See if you can tell me which one is the blue card. Stick it in there. And we're going to do a little shuffling.
8 of spades is the first call. Anyone got a different card?
Okay. Are you ready to tell me which card is the blue card?
Who's got it? 8 of spades. Everyone's at. It's
you
too
have it?
easy, right? Ah, damn it.
Is it the 8?
Is it the 8?
The 8.
Is it the 8?
Right?
Yeah. Of course.
But it's also every other card.
Did you see that?
Card.
Different color.
The rest were blue.
The whole time.
Just like when the red card gives you public input online, at meetings, surveys, and that's why we need to see all the cards, hear from all the people.
Okay.
And that's why your company is called Flash Road.
There you go. I'm glad the name works for you. That's it. I'll show you how to do. I'll tell you how to do the card trick. Thank you all for coming. Hopefully that was helpful.